If you're watching this channel, the one branded for Advanced Dungeon Masters, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you already know how to make an interesting NPC. There are tons of resources out there telling you how to give them a quirk, a goal, a secret, or some other compelling trait. How to make an NPC stimulating through their distinctiveness. And if you didn't know, I suppose I just told you. But more than just interesting, what can you do to make that NPC likable? What can you as the DM do not only to just catch the party's attention, but hold on to it in a positive way? Players can be fickle. Sometimes they'll latch onto a stock character, like a random merchant, just due to something you'll spontaneously say. But one of the more frustrating things that can happen is the opposite. You want the players to like an NPC because the story kind of depends on it. They need help, they have information, they have connections, but the players don't care, and they're only going along to further the plot. And that's the kind of metagaming that really gets to me. And to be fair to us as DMs, this is partially the player's responsibility. They can use their power of shared storytelling to invent a reason why their character likes this NPC. He reminds me of myself as a young lad. The same thing happened to my master, and it really irked me. Being owed a favor puts me in a position of power. But that only gets you so far. That only tells you why your characters could be driven to help this NPC. To be really invested, what you want is the players to like them. While which NPCs the players become enchanted with can seem unpredictable, I don't think it's entirely random. I think there are definite things we as DMs can do to make our NPCs more likable. And like most things, there is a lot of ways to do this. So in this video, I'm gonna give 2 cheap ways to make your players like an NPC and the sort of problems with them. Then I'm gonna talk about some stronger techniques to build likability, things that I've done in my home game that I'm gonna break down and give examples of. And at the end of the video, there is another tip that, well, I personally don't really like, but it's definitely useful, it definitely works, so I feel kind of compelled to share. And we're also gonna talk about Galder's Gazetteer because submissions are due. There are some fast and easy ways to get your party to like an NPC, and they're great if you need a quick stock character to fill a scene or you want to do something on the fly. But for reasons we'll discuss, you really shouldn't rely on these methods for long-term NPCs, characters that are going to be around for a while in your story. The first cheap way is to just have the NPC acquiesce to everything the party wants. Part of the fun of role-playing games is the fantasy fulfillment of power and respect, and players can easily get put off by anything that seems to be standing in their way, including other characters. So when the party comes across an NPC who gives them admiration, fealty, and I guess the prices they demand, the party tends to instantly take a shining towards them. The problem with this is it's easy, but it won't last for long. If every townsfolk, if every merchant, if every NPC who's not a villain is just a pushover, then your game has lost a lot of its texture, a lot of its dramatic potential. Conflict and the resulting tension is interesting. A world populated by sycophants is just boring. The second cheap way is to just make them useful. Of course, a character that demonstrates utility is going to be looked upon favorably by the party. And having an NPC that lends a helping hand or provides material support isn't a problem per se. The issue is, if that's all they do to endear themselves to the players, then once they stop being useful, the party's affection ends. So if you want an NPC to be likable in the long term, you have to do more than just make them useful. Because being nice and doing the things the party wants and always being on hand is only good for so long, building other forms of likability is key. That way, even if your NPC is acting in a way that's not strictly in the party's interest, the players will still hold affection for them. Screenwriter Blake Snyder coined the term "save the cat" in his seminal work on screenwriting, Save the Cat. But I'm gonna use the phrase "save the kitten" because it so nicely mirrors my advice in the "get your players to hate your villain" video, where I recommend you have the baddie kill the puppy. Named for Ripley's action in the movie Alien, saving the kitten is a scene you put in your story where you show a character doing something nice, something kind or heroic, something that shows, not tells, the players that this NPC is somebody worthwhile. It creates a sense of admirability towards the NPC that helps your players invest in them. The best example of this I've had in my game was a lone shepherd armed only with a sling, standing defiantly against a ravaging pack of gnolls. That image of one lone man defending his flock against all odds instantly endeared him to my players. And showing an NPC has a good heart also allows for redeemability, because players, and I guess their characters, are notoriously unforgiving of anything that gets in their way. By showing that NPC performing an act of kindness, if later on that NPC acts in a way that's not exactly in the player's interest, your players can have an emotional anchor that keeps that NPC from becoming iced. This is also a great way to earn the respect and admiration for an NPC who might not be the friendliest. Katniss from the Hunger Games, she's kind of surly, kind of cold, and she goes around killing children. But because she has this great save the kitten moment, We still root for her, we still like her. One final note on the save the kitten concept is don't have your NPC just drop a copper coin to some random beggar or do some other random act of kindness. You want the moment of revealing their nature to come from the story. If it's grounded in the narrative you've already set up, it's more impactful because the players get to perceive that NPC's actions in context. In my home game, I just used this technique last week. There's more of it on the session planning video, but the gist of it is the players had heard of Sir Gladrill's heroics, but hadn't yet seen it. Now this is gonna sound weird, but because they hadn't experienced it, it wasn't real in our shared imagination. The heroes were escorting a halfling back to his wife and newborn, but when they arrived at the village, the Sunland army, a known and ever-present foe, had already begun torching it. While the party was engaged in combat, they witnessed Gladrill smite the soldier about to murder the halfling mother, and then run into the burning building to rescue the baby. Maybe that's a bit too on the nose, but because all of those elements, the baby, the halfling, the army, were also deeply tied to the story, the players now feel, not just know, but really feel that, hey, this is a good dude. It's sort of the nature of the game for the DM to try to surprise the players. After all, the continuous promise of the unexpected is one of the major appeals of playing. The flip side of that is, the players are always on guard. Not just against monster ambushes, pit traps, or mimics, which I never use, but they're also suspicious of characters. In most adventures, there is going to be at least one betrayal. So, kind of reasonably, experienced players regard each NPC as the potential traitor. With that in mind, one of the best ways to get your players to like an NPC is to build trust. The classic example is helping in combat. Showing the characters that the NPC has their back in the fight is a great way to build camaraderie. But there are other, more subtle ways you can build trust too. One of the most effective, in my opinion, is having an NPC show that they trust the party first. As DM, you can construct a scenario where that NPC is vulnerable. They're asleep, bewitched, or otherwise compromised. When you give the players the opportunity, and they decide to do the right thing with it, make sure you have the NPC acknowledge and recognize their new belief in the player's fidelity. Expanding on this, you can have the NPC show their confidence in the party by exposing some emotional vulnerability. You can have the NPC open up about a deep-seated fear, a regret, or a hope that they wouldn't share with just anyone. When it comes to the players trusting an NPC, don't expect it to happen all at once. Instead, you need to create a series of opportunities where the players take increasingly large risks in trusting this NPC and then having it pay off. Knowing that they're able to count on this NPC through their experiences increases the likelihood that the players will not only find this NPC reliable, but likable. Having an NPC that builds off a player's interest or relates to a character's backstory is probably the strongest way to build likability in an NPC. Having elements in your game that specifically tie into an individual PC works so well to establish congeniality because it helps that player feel important. From each player's point of view, their character is the protagonist. They see the game world through their character's eyes. So anything that you put in the fiction that affirms that their character is indeed special and integral to the story, that player's gonna like. Unless that NPC is actively thwarting their plans or harming the party, simply having a connection is usually enough to initially tip the balance towards favorability. From there, you can layer on some of the other techniques we've gone over. This could even be a good chance to engage in some shared storytelling. When you first introduce an NPC, you can do something like, this is the Smith you know from way back in Runefield. You like him because... in fact, why do you like him? And if your players are good at improv, they'll take what you just gave them, you like him because, and apply a little yes and straight up tell you, the DM, the reason why they like this person. They'll give you all the tools you need. It could be some action in the past. Oh, he helped us out of a jam. Or it could be some trait that they have. He's really good at cooking. Or if your players are kind of mean, they can kind of set you up as the DM. I like this NPC because it always talks in a really squeaky, funny goblin voice. Which sort of brings us to our next point. So this is the tip that I don't really like giving as advice, but because it's so effective, I kind of have to talk about. If you just make yourself silly, if you make the NPC humorous, yeah, your players are gonna like it. After all, that's one of the real things we get from playing D&D together, is just sit around the table with our friends and laugh. And having an NPC that will specifically bring that out or encourage that behavior is going to be really useful. The players are really going to like it. The reason I don't necessarily feel it's great advice is because it puts a lot of pressure on the DM to act in the moment. Not everyone can be funny on command. All these other tips are things that you can build off of and sort of plot in advance and sort of keep in the back of your mind. But humor is one of those things that most often arises just spontaneously. Besides, I already advocate that not every DM needs to speak in a character voice. And so if I tell you the best way to make an NPC to be likable is just do funny voices, that's kind of going against that idea. And the last reason I'm not a big fan of relying on humor as the main tent pole on which to stake the likability of our NPC is because I don't want to get into this idea that the DM is there for entertainment. The DM is there to be sort of like the ringmaster of the circus, but it's everyone's responsibility to bring that humor and levity into the game. yeah, that's it. That's the video, folks. This was a pretty good one, I thought. So if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. The third playtest packet is out for the people who backed the Kickstarter or part of the early mailing list. The third playtest packet has a werebeast class. Very cool. So look out for the survey for that. The fourth playtest packet is coming out soon. Submissions for Galder's Gazetteer are due. If for some reason you're watching this video, haven't gotten any of the emails, and backed at bronze tier or higher, and haven't submitted your submission form, please let me know in the comments. And for everybody else, if you have some ideas about how to make NPCs more likable, be sure to let me know in the comments below.
Sue me, dickhead.